So, I have a new economic theory that involves games and card games. I started thinking about it a while back, but also recently I listened to the great courses. It was a history of the Industrial Revolution, and there was this point in it that keeps slipping my mind every time I try to remember the thought that I had when he mentioned it, that inevitably production increases in industry in whatever you're talking about. And this was, he's mostly talking about the late 19th and early 20th century. And then the market booms and busts, which were far, far worse before the Great Depression. There were basically a bunch of Great Depression era like booms and busts. But the Great Depression also had a bunch of other things going on with it that caused a lot more problems, and that it was well documented. There was a lot of new technologies and the ability to document this stuff, as well as a dust bowl and all this other stuff. So the booms and busts may on paper look the same. Functionally maybe they weren't, but after the Great Depression, after we experienced that, governments had made some changes, and a lot of them just started following Keynesian economics, and slowly that Keynesian economics started to curve, or use within the West curved upwards. And then you notice that the booms and busts sort of just become a wave, and it's an economic wave, and we have economic cycles that are far less extreme on both ends, right? And obviously whenever you're talking about market stuff or economic stuff in relation to Magic the Gathering, one of the biggest YouTubers that discusses this kind of stuff is Rudy, and he's always the first to tell you that there's no, you don't create more wealth, it just moves around. But then also he mentions that your time is your most valuable resource, right? And that is a thing that is continually being added to the system. And I'll get back to that in a bit. So the thought that I had with these economic cycles becoming less extreme and therefore less damaging, so like we have the 2008 and the recent 2022, 2023 crashes to think about, and in no way are they comparable to the Great Depression, and they're not comparable to the things before the Great Depression. And as I said, it was the addition of using Keynesian economic models to sort of not flatten the curve, but basically it becomes a wave market cycle, right? Then I thought, because he would talk about how the production of these industries would outstrip demand, but at first demand would increase exponentially or arithmetically or by however much it increased, and then these companies would continually produce, but then demand would drop off and they would be left with a lot of product that they couldn't move, and then basically they'd have to lay off people and create this massive unemployment. And we have had that in market cycles, but not, again, to the same extreme. So then, because obviously whenever you're listening to a history of the Industrial Revolution, they talk about Henry Ford. And now, they weren't talking necessarily of this part of Henry Ford, they were talking about production line, Model T, that kind of stuff. But starting with Henry Ford and moving forward, we started collecting more and more and more metrics, right? And as you gather more metrics, you can analyze more data. And then, as you analyze more data, you gather more data, and you become better at analyzing the data. You become better at sort of predicting and planning for that prediction. And as we become more sophisticated as a society, we become better at using the knowledge and predicting the probable outcomes, the possible outcomes, whatever, more than one type of outcome, and planning for the middle of the road. And it just depends on what kind of company you have and the people that are in the departments that are supposed to be planning this. Now, not every company has, financial analysts analyzing the market as a whole and figuring out how your company fits into that, right? But the bigger the company, presumably, the more likely you are to have that. And Rudy has also mentioned that there's people like this at Wizards of the Coast. I don't know if that's true or if that's not true, but he often says it in relation to analyzing the secondary market. But what if, in addition to that, they're monitoring every part of the market that Magic has, and then sending this information to the people that make decisions on how much Wizards produces, how much Wizards doesn't produce, and they're planning for that kind of thing. And maybe the disconnect in when the decision is made and when the market turns is a large gap, because the market turned in 2020 and then turned the other way in 2021, and it took them more than a year both times to adjust to those changes. So I would say that, like Stalin doesn't want to listen to his analysts, I would say that there's people in every company, and probably in Hasbro and Wizards, that don't want to listen to their analysts, even if their analysts have the correct information. But they're just analysts. They're not, they're not going to cocktail parties, right? So you kind of look down on them, even if they are middle class or upper middle class, because the CEOs are much above that. So to get back to the idea of the thing that I mentioned earlier, the time in the system, I had this idea of the perpetual motion machine, but not an actual perpetual motion machine, because thermodynamically they're not possible, or something like that. But perceptual perpetual motion machines are possible, and in fact do exist. And my best example of that is the sun. The sun, to humans, is a perpetual motion machine, because the human race might be extinct before the sun stopped spitting out the level of energy that it's spitting out, right? It's not a perpetual motion machine, because it's going to stop at some point in time, and it's going to basically, expand, consume the earth, explode, separate into its various different particles, turn into nebulae, and then eventually get sucked into some other star and be recycled. But to us, it's never ending, right? And it's just continually putting in that output of energy. Now, I had this thought back, I don't know, it was probably like 15, 20 years ago, trying to think of why wealth has been increasing, because it has. And part of that is technology, part of that is micronization, part of that is a whole lot of other things, efficiencies within the system. But I think there are more inputs coming in. And at first I thought it was plants, right? Because plants, all they require is the energy from the sun and the carbon that the rest of life farts out. And then they fart out oxygen, right? And then those plants create energy for those other things in the system, and those things, the circle of life, basically, right? So humans add their labor to that, and that was the next thought that I had. And the labor is added to the system, and each process of the system, whether it's processing minerals, or gathering minerals, processing minerals, manufacturing items from minerals, the services that move those manufactured goods around, that kind of stuff. All the different industries all have inputs in the system from humans, who are eventually going to die, but be replaced by more humans. And to go back to the thing about Rudy, that time is a valuable resource, because everyone owns a little piece of time, and they're selling a little bit of their time to the system. And this is where the wealth increase is coming from, in addition to plants, animals, and all the other renewable resources that are all part of this perceptual perpetual motion machine. So to get back to the card game aspect of it, Wizards of the Coast has adjusted something within their system to recognize the exigencies of the day, which is a fancy way of saying they know that things were shit and the market had changed and they can't do things like they were doing before. But they might be able to get back to 2017, 2018 levels, and maybe that's where they're at. Maybe they're actually a little bit above that, because after the pandemic started, a lot more people got back into Magic or newly into Magic, and I would say, and I think a lot of people are guessing this, there's a lot more people playing card games these days, and a lot more people playing Magic the Gathering. And then you throw in the indie card games, and it just seems like, you know, we were already on this trend for more people playing games in person with physical things rather than, you know, the depersonalized internet. People are coming back together. They want to socialize. And of course, a pandemic threw a monkey wrench into socialization, but people still desired it. So there's more people in the system. The demand has been suppressed by inflation and worry about the future and just other factors that keep people from spending their money. But at some point in the market cycle, in the wave that goes on, it goes up after it goes down. And we may be at that point. A lot of people are speculating that we're at that point, and a lot of things seem to be happening in the collectible card world that suggest that we are at least past the bottom. The bottoming possibly happened either end of 2022, beginning of 2023, or somewhere 6 months out from either of those points. We don't actually know, and these things, we can't know these things until, like, say 6 months, a year, 2 years out. Even 10 years is probably better to understand where we are at in a market cycle. We can guess at it, and we can make some very good guesses based on whatever our knowledge base is and the data that we have and our ability to analyze that data. I'm not the kind of person that analyzes data or collects data, so I'm not going to say where we are, but there's just some indicators that seem to suggest that we're at some other point in the market cycle other than down. And a lot of the sets that came out recently have suggested that. I mean, you have the failures of the Innistrad sets, like abject failures of the Innistrad sets, and how much they were dumped on Amazon. And then after that, things didn't go so well for, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, Baldur's Gate, and New Capenna, and even, you know, even into Brothers War and stuff like that. And it was a lot of volatility. Sometimes a set would seem to be like it was doing okay, and maybe we were turning a corner, but then the next set, terrible. And I came into it as a store in August, so starting with Commander Masters, and we don't know how well Commander Masters would have sold had it been a regularly priced item or even a slightly above priced item, like, say, Ravnica Remastered price. Commander Masters was so astronomically priced that even if the system was already on an uptrend, it threw it into a downtrend again. And then Wilds of Eldraine and Ixalan kind of reversed course again. And then we came to the play boosters with Karlov Manor. And they are higher priced than what the consumer was used to. And every time there's been a price increase in standard sets, Magic the Gathering, as far as I can tell, it's rejected. That first product is absolutely rejected by the market until the next set comes along, and then slowly people are like, well, don't really have much of a choice because it's not going anywhere. And I think with Karlov Manor, there were people that were still buying draft boxes, and most people were buying set boxes, apparently. Apparently this was the most common type of Magic product sold in most sets, generally speaking. So the people that were buying set boxes were buying 24-pack set boxes. So when it became a 36 set pack box, that was a massive price increase for them. And the draft boxes at 36 packs were, you know, much below what the play boosters are now. So again, a massive price increase. And also, I'm pretty sure that the play boosters individually, or I guess a box of play boosters, is still even more expensive than 36 set boosters. that they threw 36 set boosters in and rose the price to what 36 set boosters would be, and then also said, and throw in a little bit more. So Karlov, I'm pretty sure, is rejected because it's the first price increase set. It's also possible that it's because it's Clue, and who cares about Clue? But it's set on Ravnica, and people kind of like Ravnica. But then again, Ravnica sets don't always do well. People love it, but they don't always do well. Or Wizards overprints it. But in this case, Wizards has seemed to have cut down like a lot on their printing, or at least they want us to think that that's true. But I mean, their quarterly report at Q4 of 2023, they're telling the shareholders that they cut their inventory by 50%, which, you know, they can lie about it, but they will pay a price for lying about that. So if they're cutting the inventory by 50%, then what's the chance that they're going to continue creating that kind of inventory again and have to cut it by 50% again, right? And how did they cut the inventory by 50%? They didn't sell it all. They probably destroyed a lot of the inventory. Or Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlance books from Dungeons and Dragons and like this board game that they made for Dragonlance got sent to liquidators, and some of the toys and other stuff got sent to liquidators, but they didn't liquidate it all, and they didn't dump it on Amazon, all of it. We saw Modern Horizons 2 in the dump, and we didn't see other things in the dump other than the stuff that was on the skid with Modern Horizons 2, but we didn't see other events of that happening because probably whoever took those pictures was either told to take the pictures and leak them or wasn't supposed to leak them and got fired. So I suggest that there was probably more destruction of inventory. And I don't know if it was, the majority of the inventory that was reduced was destroyed or whether it was liquidated or whatever. But they cut down on that inventory. So it's unlikely that they want to get themselves into that situation again because it causes a lot of hardship for them too, and also, makes it difficult for them to keep their jobs. So if Rudy's right and there's these analysts in Wizards of the Coast, and I'm right about this perpetual motion machine and the idea of Keynesian economics and the gathering of metrics and analyzing stuff, then Wizards being behind by a year is not good, because if you're going to have these departments and people that are, really, really good mathematicians or statisticians or whatever, you should probably listen to them, because they probably, have advice to give that you could follow. And I don't think that they tend to work in absolutist terms. They probably say, these are the trends. This is the trend you're going into. These are the recommendations for such a trend. And I think a lot of companies have that sort of thing, and obviously governments have that sort of thing. You can't predict the economy. You can't predict specifics within it. And I guess I'm doing like a Harry Seldon thing with the Foundation series. But you can sort of see an overall trend. I mean, tons of people in 2021 talking about a bubble. Whether or not they knew what they were talking about, or whether or not they were on another trend of everyone talking about bubbles, there was a bubble, and it did burst. And in addition to that, we ended a market cycle, and now we're in a new market cycle. So what I'm saying is that being in this new market cycle, and with the changes that Wizards of the Coast seems to have made, and the general uptrend, we can see stuff poking through, showing us what lies in the future, with Fallout, with Ixalan, with Lord of the Rings. We can see that it used to be that, you wanted to get your Magic the Gathering product as soon as possible because it would be sold out for a bit, and then eventually it would come back. They would put more into the system. And then in 2020, it just was a fountain. It was just basically it was, you were never not going to be able to get what you wanted to get. And then that turned into not only that, but this stuff sticks on shelves forever because no one desires it as much as it's being produced. The demand is really low, and it's only taken till now for the system to kind of clear it, because there are things that are now starting to drop, not in stores, but at the distribution level, they're starting to dry up, and so they'll start to dry up at stores. But with things like Fallout and things going forward, you can expect that we're going to get back to that point before 2020 where it didn't stay on shelves and it didn't rot there, or the stores didn't have a desire to have clearance sales because they were saving that stuff into the future for whatever they do locally with their players, drafts, that sort of stuff, but also a retirement savings plan, meaning that it's there to go up in value over time. Is that going to happen, or are we done with that? Is that not a thing that collectible card games? I don't know, but I'm guessing that we're at the beginning of another market cycle, like we were. I don't know what the last Magic market cycle was because I wasn't really paying attention to it, but I'm guessing it was somewhere around 2012, 2013, the very beginnings of it after we recovered from 2008, and I think that's this again. So there might come a time when it becomes difficult for people to get the Magic the Gathering product that they want because not enough is being produced and there's more demand than there is product, and that supply and demand will have reversed themselves from what's been happening in the last few years. So that's 22 minutes of new economic theory from Brackenberries. I don't have a degree, and I mostly don't know what I'm talking about, but I do know this. I like this hat. See you later.